Okay, so I was the assistant mission commander, and then I became the team commander once we hit the water, which was the team commander basically is the relay for the helicopter, anything or any assets that were out there, and the team itself. And I'm in charge. I would basically be in charge of the ground team at that time.
So where were you and what were you doing as this, like you first got notified of this potential rescue mission coming down the pipe?
Well, actually, I was up island at a medical appointment. I had to go to see my cardiologist, and I had been fasting. So it was one of those mornings where you get the phone call and you're kind of behind the power curve already. So I was on my way back from the doctors around 9 o'clock when I got the phone call.
Do you remember what was going through your head at the moment when you like found that out? Like as far as maybe other responsibilities, or like did you see your son and kiss your wife goodbye in the morning thinking, oh, I'll see you tonight, and then all of a sudden your plans are derailed?
So we've gotten the call a few times in the past, and we haven't actually been executed or been launched for that mission. So I was kind of in the back of my mind saying, thinking that, but at the same time, I knew that with all of our efforts in the past 6 months to a year, that one day we were going to get a mission, and I was hoping that it was going to be that day. So just took my time getting into work, and I didn't notify my wife until it looked really good that we were going to be going.
Well, just curious as far as a spouse's reaction. So what was your wife's reaction, I guess, when she hears that, like, it seemed like at first it was going to be a regular Monday with just training and being on the base, to also now an unknown timeline?
Basically, she had to go pick up my son and make different arrangements and things like that. She was like, "Oh, okay, you're leaving," and basically just made other arrangements. One of the good things is the vice commander of the base was her last appointment of the day. She's a physical therapist, and she knew that he would understand if my son was attending their session for the day. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
So he actually was there with it.
Yep.
Colonel Coley?
Yep, Colonel Coley, yep.
That's wild.
So
very, very neat. That's
so
a neat
good.
side story. So then as you're thinking, I know that there's a very much like an incredible team environment down there. So I mean, as soon as things kicked off, you guys are already knowing who's being pulled. And at what point did you find out that you were going to be on the team, and how did that conversation go down?
As soon as I walked into work, there was information on the board already, and it just showed where I was as far as the assistant mission commander and team commander. So I knew I was going then, and like I said, it is a team environment, and everyone came up to me basically, "Hey, what do you need? I'm here for this. This is what's been done already." Trying to give me like a update, and it was great. So
I think as an outsider that it's so impressive to see to the degree that function takes place as far as the team environment. So even where like guys go, "Hey, did you even eat anything yet? Here, take some beef jerky, and here's a granola bar and stuff like that. Chuck it in your ruck, so this way you have something in case." Or even getting pizzas or something, just say, these guys probably come right from Randall's Island, let's just, so you guys have something. But in the busyness of all that some of the guys were saying, it was, you're just focusing on, like, I guess you have like two kind of ready packs, like one's a mountain pack, one's a water pack bag, I guess, ready to go. So then, what's the process like in your mind as you're, gearing up your thing, like, well, I know I need my water bag, but what is maybe missing, or in there some other things that you might need additionally? Like, walk us through a little bit of like what that mindset is like.
So in the planning, we do a number of different things. We take old after-action reports, and we kind of read through them, mistakes and things that they've learned, and then we also go back to the archives of, all right, last time we did this mission or prepared for this mission, this is the packing list, and with that packing list is kind of an explanation of why you would pack those things. So the team commander and the team leader will sit together and just kind of go through those things, and they write up a warning order, or warno, and that goes on the board. So the equipment list is right there. So you basically just go through the list and check off what you have. And then if you don't have anything, you notify the team commander or the team leader, and you work from there. So
just curious, out of that equipment and that gear that's on that list, is much of that, I guess, obviously this is personal items. do team members have the ability to kind of choose, like, oh, I want to get this particular thing, I like this one that I picked up from REI for whatever given thing, or is it mostly like government issue type stuff? What's that like?
So depending on, no, you can't just go out and get your Gucci jacket, but if there's like there's a certain requirement list that you must have. So let's just use, for example, down jacket or base camp type of jacket. There's 1,000 of them out there. A lot of times they will buy 20 or 30 for the guys or everybody on the team. But sometimes, we have guys in and out of this team all the time, and so they don't make that anymore, so they will have a different type of jacket, but usually has the same requirements. So it would be a base camp, jacket that's down, good under the elements kind of thing.
And that's something too, I guess it's up to each individual operator to kind of choose exactly how they want to suit up for the mission. So what are some of the differences between yourself and maybe some of the other guys, or, as people are choosing like what to wear and not to wear, what to wear underneath the dry suit kind of thing, and what exactly are you actually physically wearing in the plane, and then what are you wearing once you hit the water and making your way to the vessel?
So to answer the first part of the question, each guy has a different responsibility for the team. So as a commander or a team commander, mine is communication. So I have a lot of radios. I will carry 2 radios, and I'll have another radio as a backup. This is for a tactical ground mission, but just for an example. And so I'm heavy on my comm equipment, whereas the team leader and the medics, the PJs, they will be heavy intensive on the medical side of the house. So their kits, our kit is what we wear. It's called a tactical kit. Will be different between the members, just based on their responsibilities for the team. So for this mission, we knew the water temp was 66, so we wore something very light underneath, and we have team shirts that we wear. They're long sleeve, short sleeve, and basically that's what I wore under my dry suit. The team leader did put out, you will wear because we have 3 types of dry suits, you will wear the high visibility dry suit. So everyone had one of those. And we didn't put that on until almost like the last minute, because once you jock up, it gets very, very hot. So
what does jock up mean for anybody that doesn't know?
So jocking up is putting your dry suit on, putting your harness on in case you need to get hoisted up by a helicopter or by the davit on the ship, and then putting on your parachute.
So it's basically all your gear.
It's all
depends on what the environment
all of your gear, depending on the environment. Short answer, yes.
And is that something that most guys do on their own, or is it like a buddy system? You assist each other on that?
It's usually a buddy system. In training, we try to have the younger guys do it by themselves to show them how hard it is, but just for an example, when you put your fins on, if you don't have a secondary device or like a clip, there's some of the flippers will have like a little a clip that will be the secondary device to secure it. If you don't have that, you need to use duct tape. So just imagine all of your gear on, your parachute, your dry suit, you got thick clothes underneath, trying to put your suit on and then work out to put this duct tape on. It's much easier for your teammate because it saves you a lot of energy and getting extra hot to do that. So, and then a lot of times you can't see all of the clips that so your rucksack has to come on. It's got to be secured to 2 things here, and then there's a lowering line that is attached to a little D-ring on the side. And a lot of times you just can't see it. You can work your way to feel it, but if you have heavy gloves on, so to get that positive identification, that is the right one that's going on, it's better to have a buddy check and have a buddy do it for you.
So in this scenario for this team, I know one of the PJs actually stayed behind in the aircraft and handled a bigger support function too. It was Sergeant Joe Piccoli.
Yep.
So like somebody like Joe is, I guess, kind of instrumental in like crossing off those T's, dotting those I's to make sure everybody's good to go. And what other function did he provide, I guess, in the way of like eyes and ears and understanding the career field and needs, or how does that?
His experience was great, between the medical and also just the jump mastering and knowing what we're going into. He did a great job. He basically filled in the gap. It was a term that we use. Looking for work, he didn't stop the entire time. So we had 4.5 hour flight, and that 4.5 hours went by extremely quick. We had to do different types of briefs. We had to prep equipment. So personally for me, he rigged both of my chutes for night lighting. So it's probably basically 5 chem lights on each parachute. He did help me get jocked up. And then, is that bad?
Yeah, you can just pick that up.
Okay. So, and then, yeah, even right before we went out the door, you know, he gave me another pin check, made sure, you know, everything was good. So he was instrumental in this, getting us out the door.
It's got to be a huge degree of trust, I'd imagine, between team members to like that you guys know. Ultimately, in many ways, your lives are in each other's hands when you step out the door for a mission like this, whether it's peacetime or combat. There's just so many things that could go wrong. So, what's that like being a more senior guy and somebody that's been on and in the military longer, versus say like the most junior guy on the mission? You know, what are your thoughts and feelings about that and how that might work?
I think our selection course is where it starts, and it doesn't stop until you know, end of your career. You know, when you ask somebody to do something as simple as every jump that we go on, we do a pin check, which is basically checking to make sure the pins aren't bent, frayed, or they're coming undone. And you have checking your AED, which is your secondary opening device for your parachute. So it's life-saving, right? And you can't check it yourself. So every jump, 2 minutes, you stand up, and the guy behind you is checking you. And you have to just know that he's not just giving it the once-over and giving you the slap on the butt. He's looking at it, and he knows what to look for, and he's doing it.
So for this mission, I think that things were maybe more critical than most in the way of like your limitations for, you know, operational versus training. So you guys in many ways were like just within operational limits on this. And part of the things that pose as challenges, could you talk us through some of like what does that mean to say like if you're, you know, jumping at just kind of within operational limits, how does that pose challenges to, you know, dangers versus training?
So going out there,
not talking about specific numbers. You know?
Okay, yeah. So you know, going out there, we knew that we might have to, you know, push the edge. But I think during our training, we always say, hey, what's our training limits? What's our operational limits? So you kind of have in the back of your mind, we know we can do this safely. And you just basically trust that. So as I said, we weren't that far off the limits. And so I didn't feel that was, you know, it increased the danger that much. So.
Does that boil down to like when you're at a lower cloud deck and a lower altitude jumping, there's less time to make quick split-second decisions for, you know, in the event you had a bad canopy or something like that?
Yeah, so it's less time. You know, altitude is your friend in order to, you know, correct any malfunction in your parachute. So the higher the better. But in this case, you know, we're down. Like I said, we're still within limits. So and the extra, what the crew did to give us the extra 300 feet. Really helped all of us because for some reason we all did have some twists and just a little bit of a slow opening. So it definitely helped out.
How about if you could talk for a moment about the performance of the crew? Where I understand it was like things were just on the money that night.
Yeah, the crew was, they put it out there probably just as much as we did. They knew what we needed. They tried not to rush us or, you know, because they knew what we were dealing with, but at the same time you could hear it in their voices like, hey, I need an answer now about this. And it wasn't until we got back that, you know, they were basically pretty low on fuel, and they were concerned if, you know, if the winds changed, that they may not make it back to where they were going. So, but they knew what we needed, and they stayed on scene as long as they could.
That's an incredible piece of the story in my mind as well, just the idea that on all ends, both you guys, the crew, that like everybody seems to collectively be trying to strike that perfect balance of like for them, you know, maxing out the speed as much as you can with holding back enough to have enough gas to do the mission when you get there. And for you guys, like, you know what I mean, when it comes down to, you know, utilizing the equipment and medicine you have in the best way for the patient, but in the most conservative way to make the timeline for how long you might potentially be out there as well. It's like this really fine balance of like, you know, pushing that limit as much as you can with, you know, being aware of what you need to conserve to complete the mission.
Absolutely, and through that entire mission, basically, we were playing out different courses of action the entire way. Like, so if this happens, what are we going to do? Which route are we going to take in order to sustain the timeline that we had?
What's it like in terms of maybe even just a feeling as a person, knowing this is real world versus training, and you're going out for a night jump? I'm sure you've done night jumps a number of times, but this is not a night jump into the bay. This is out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and God knows all the 50 million variables that could occur.
I think the biggest thing is you can get your mind racing and into that thing. Oh my God, it's the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and also that kind of thing. But when you put the real world into it, which is there's patients dying, there's people dying right now. Your mind is just focused on that. You don't think about the what ifs really. It's how can we get there, and just the next step, and we're going to do this. So
that's impressive too. I think that there's that compromise of speed and safety. That's a constant, seems throughout with all the different team members that I've talked to. And so when you were, that sense of urgency is always present. Was there a gradient to the feelings of accomplishment in terms of like, okay, now we're up and in the air, we're on the way. Now we're out the door and we're in the water. Now we got the engine running, we're on the way to the vessel. Now we're on the deck, and now we're, here, and we're getting first hands on the patients. Does it feel like steps of accomplishment, or is it just kind of like more of a blur?
It's I'd say a little more of a blur. I don't think the accomplishment came until maybe we got home and then reported to work on Monday, and everyone is just high-fiving and congratulating me. It's just so.
That's interesting too. So that piece of it, I know, like for you, this journey began Monday, and when personally did it end for you? Like that you're back home to your family, and then what it's like to get back to work that Monday morning.
Yeah, so I got back on Saturday at around 6 o'clock, and kissed my wife and kissed my son. It was a great feeling, and we did celebrate, and the accomplishment. But Monday coming back to work, just the excitement from everybody. The whole team was charged up. You could feel the energy in the building, and it was just great. And then we had drill weekend, and we had a little celebration, and we hung the life ring, and that was great too. Getting the crew back together was, I think, the first time I saw the pilot since the whole thing. So I think that was another self-accomplishment, the feeling of the accomplishment. We're all together again, the team, so it was good.
I think there are some pieces of this story that people don't realize that you guys contended with that I'm sure at a human level have to be a little bit heart-wrenching. One, for the patients and the condition that they were in. These guys went through some horrifically traumatic event. And then for the two gentlemen that did not make it, and that I think many people are not aware that you guys actually had to contend with the deceased, and handle those folks with the most honor that you could, and figure out a way to take over that piece to some degree, because I think everybody on the ship was in some degree of shock. So what was that like? Yeah,
the captain and the first mate, they didn't know exactly what to do with the deceased. They thought they maybe had to leave them there, in the present location, and we kind of advised against that. And they were like, "Well, we got to find out from the company." So we kind of persuaded them, like, "Hey, let's do the right thing, body bag and get them out of sight. Let's clean the room so that the other crew members don't have to see the mess and smell and what happened there." So we did that, it's definitely a memory. I wish we maybe could have done something, but seeing them in the condition, I don't think even if we got there 5 hours earlier, it would have had much of an impact. So it's unfortunate, but
that's definitely a big part of the job, though. I guess it's like, I would imagine that there's a big psychological piece that weighs on that crew. And to what you said, if just nobody did anything, it sounds like they may not have, or they just didn't have their head around it enough yet, that having you guys there to handle that very unfortunate but necessary task is a difference maker. And then What was the relationship like with the crew and with maybe some of the friends of these folks? As you guys, I know, were at the wheel. Like, as soon as you got there, you were probably, first time you touched her, were eyes on the patient, was somewhere in the 8 o'clock neighborhood, Eastern
Yes.
time, somewhere in there?
Yes.
And then you guys were clear through to like 4 o'clock in the morning as far as active patient care, and then started to break off into shifts after that.
Yes.
So during that time frame, I guess, what was the interaction with the crew or their friends or any of that you might have had like?
So the captain and the first mate were really, really concerned. They just kept asking, hey, how, can we do anything for you, and can we, what else can we do, and how are they? But the rest of the crew, I'm not sure if they were commanded to, but they basically were, running the ship and not really coming by much, which I was kind of surprised. But then I thought maybe it was just a small crew. But then when we were getting ready for the exfil, which is, getting them packaged and bringing them down the flights of stairs to get on the helicopter, we asked for some help, and they came out of the woodwork. And everyone, there was probably 15 people there to help carry their friends to, down the flight of stairs. And at that time, they were just like, how are they going to make it? Are they going to make it? Kind of thing. Very concerned. So.
About how big was the crew? Do you have any idea? I don't know.
If I had to guess,
Yeah.
20 to 25.
Sure.
And I think in the entire 40 hours or 35 hours I was on the ship, I think I only saw 5 or 6 crew members like I said, until we were ready for exfil.
Yeah, so in many ways,
So.
I'm sure that they were directed like, hey, you let these guys work and, let's stay out of their way to some degree.
Yeah.
Do you remember what your initial reaction was when you first arrived and saw the patients and saw the condition they were in? At that time, were they lucid, talking, walking around, or are they?
They were in a lot of pain. Lucid on and off. They'd sit up for a second to spit up, or they might have been choking a little bit, and then they would just kind of yell and, out of pain. But my first reaction was, I'm glad we're here. And I trusted my teammates and their medical expertise that we were gonna take care of them and stabilize them. So it was good. There was only one point where I was like, oh my God, we're not gonna save them. But little prayer and little teamwork, and we managed the situation. So it's good.
I'm glad you brought up that piece, because I think when we think about it from a military standpoint, we have our 4 pillars, and I think a lot of times stuff like that might be, blown off a little bit or glazed over in training, but in all reality, I think a lot of that stuff really does come into play real world when you're doing stuff, and one of those is spiritual. Are there moments ever, I'm just curious, that as a team or personally that is ever brought into the fold, that there's ever moments where, you say, hey, that you as yourself, when you're leaving out the door, that you have a moment to just kind of, spiritually connect and maybe say a prayer? Is that something that you do or some of the other team members do? And, I don't know if it's like a Giants locker room huddle kind of deal.
Yeah, right.
What's the environment like in that regard?
So I think the team as a whole I've never prayed, and I think if you ask any individual, there are certain times where, or at least one time in their career, that yes, they're going to pray. But my story is I definitely found a moment to pray. And it was basically, I thought about, as you mentioned before, did I kiss my wife and my son goodbye enough? And I was just like, all right, I was just, God, if this is my time to go, I guess this is it. But please, I really like to make an impact on these people's lives.
As a combat rescue officer, help me and maybe somebody watching understand, there's not necessarily any requirement for a medical piece of it, or what, if anything, is there in terms of a medical component for a combat rescue officer? And then if you could talk about what you do and what you've chosen to do.
So if you choose to join the military and go the route of a PJ or Crow, a combat rescue officer, they go through basically the same pipeline. But when the PJs break off to go to medical, which is 6 to 8 months of a paramedic program, the combat rescue officers go to another route, and they do mission planning, some SEER things, and some other schools. And then they basically join up again to do the overall, the last school, which we call PJU, which brings everything together. I got into the game by being on PJ first, so I had all the medical training, and I had the certificate. I worked as a paramedic for a little time, and then I crossed over to become a crow. Some crows that follow that route decide not to do the 2.5 weeks of medical training, the paramedic refresher, and the other training. You have to do 30 to 40 hours of medical training throughout the year. I always thought it was important to do. Number one, to understand the PJ's job as medicine, and just to upkeep the the training, because a lot of, even just the technology in the medical profession changes. So, what used to be a tubing for an IV has changed. So now at least you just practice with it and understand what some of it is. So I had just done my paramedic in January. It was a 2.5 week course. It was local here. It was I did that, and it paid off.
Absolutely. So that is a decent commitment to maintain that currency.
It's with everything else that's going on in my job, it's definitely, but medicine is what makes a PJ and the Guardian Angel career field. I mean, we're the only ones that have the paramedics that can do what we do. So the medicine's a huge part. I mean, so to be able to assist and help and keep that training up is definitely important to me.
So if someone were coming in off the street, kind of as you're saying, as a combat rescue officer, there's no requirement for that.
No, there's no requirement.
So they would never really touch that level of medicine in the career field as a part of the pipeline. In
the pipeline, they do the so our the PJs are allowed to do some surgical, and they do some extra things that normal paramedics are not allowed to do. So the drugs and chest tubes and needle decompressions and things like that. So they get maybe a week or two of the ground medicine, but that's really it. So.
Understood. I think that's a really pretty interesting piece of it all too, and it's true, like what you said, is the idea is this whole thing is grounded in that. The reason why we were the team of choice, from my understanding, is that the high level of medical capability combined with the ability to insert under any conditions in any environment, and the speed at which you could get there made it that we were the team of choice. The next closest asset was hours behind, and didn't have the same level of medical capability, and certainly not the numbers. It was down to like one physician assistant with an unknown amount of medical equipment and fluids and everything else that you'd need for potentially, at the time that you guys launched, thinking 5 burn patients. It ended up being 4. So what do you think in terms of like the experience of the things that were known at the time you departed Gabreski versus stepping off that helicopter in the Azores and wrapping up that piece? Was it very reflective of the reality, or did a lot of pieces change over that time, and what was your takeaway?
That's a good question. So let's take it by phases. So we thought it was 5 patients, and we actually got on board, it was 4. We thought the cloud deck was going to be 800 feet. It turned out to work in our favor. It came up to jump limits, which was, we thought maybe going into it we weren't going to be able to even jump if the cloud deck was that low. The other uncertain was the davit, if the boat actually had a davit, and how we're going to bring the boat and equipment and our personnel up onto this 600, 700-foot ship. The sea states, they said they were 2 to 3. They were definitely a little more than that. I would say the only other certainty was the helicopter's ability to do the hoist off of the ship. I'll tell you a little story. So I was talking to my teammate, Sergeant Smith, and we had discussed, hey, I'm a little nervous about this hoist. The boat's not going to stop. The helicopter's going to come in. So there's a lot of just moving parts. How are we going to do it? How are we going to do it safely? And more importantly, too, is if something did go bad and they had to cut the cable, how are we going to get Sergeant Smith back? So we discussed, he was definitely like, all right, I have a plan. I've thought about it, so this is the plan. You know, if I go down, I'm going to cut away from the patient. I'm going to try to hold the patient up, and I'm going to wait for that Portuguese warship that's 3 miles behind us, and hopefully they have a boat that can come and find me. And that was the plan. There was no other way to mitigate that risk. But quite honestly, when that helicopter got on scene and that rescue swimmer came out dangling from the hoist, we knew we were going to be okay. And all of us, the whole team, looked at each other and smiled because we knew we were going to get home safe. And that wasn't one of the unknowns. We didn't really have an exfil plan going into this mission. And as it developed, we're like, this is what we have. We have to get these patients off because we don't have meds and we can't wait another 15 hours on this ship. We have to go by this helicopter. So, and then when we touched down, yeah, we were greeted by the base commander. That was my first congratulations, and that was, I think, the first time I was like, whew, I think we did it. So.
That's amazing to me. I think a couple things, follow-up questions for that.
Okay.
One would be, is it fair to assume like that the plan in the event of no better plan presenting is to just stay on the vessel until you make landfall?
Well, we knew we had limited meds, so that posed another problem of, all right, we have to get the other ship to come here and hand off meds for us. So, time was critical. I mean, we saved almost a full day. You know, by the time they got, the ship didn't reach land for another 20 hours. So we saved 20 hours to get them to Portugal.
That is, I guess, like to your point, when you're thinking about things that were short in supply, it would be once you unplug from power, now you're on battery power for those ventilators.
Yes.
And then fluids. I guess are those the two things that would be in short supply once you're kind of like unplugged?
Yeah, once we're unplugged, we could always, the fluids are not an issue, but yeah, definitely the vents have a shorter battery life. And just the medications themselves, they were going through drugs pretty quickly, and we only had probably 8 hours left. So there was actually a point where the medics, if we stayed on, you know, we said, you know, as we said before, we talk about all courses of action and worst case scenarios, but we said, okay, well, we might have to get to a point where we might have to choose which person that we medicate at this point. Like if we run out of meds, do we save one? And, you know, so which one's better? And so we just finally said, no, we're not gonna, that's probably not gonna happen. We'll deal with that later on, but maybe just have it in the back of your mind, like, you know, so it's a horrible decision.
Yeah. Right.
But, you know, that's when we saw the necessity and we're like, all right, so what is our plan? Can we get another helicopter to come and even just drop us meds kind of thing? Or what else can we do? What else is out there? So.
That's pretty fascinating too. Back to this whole theme, which I see it as this very tricky balance that is like fraught with danger on all ends for the patients, for yourselves. Mm-hmm. Just the idea, from what I understand from Sergeant Brian Delary, is like that making that decision to use that rope and pulley system to lower them 3 stories down and get them on the deck instead of muscle down for the whole 3 flights of stairs, probably saved enough time that the helicopter was there almost right away as you guys got down. And had that not been the case, who knows, because the helicopter was already reporting that their fuel situation was such that they didn't have a whole lot of time to be able to take both patients and your team onto the helicopter to get you out of there. So it seems like these pieces all kind of fell into place.
There was a lot that could have went wrong on this mission, and there's maybe a few things that we would have changed in retrospect, but we worked through all the problems, and pretty almost flawlessly, you know, if I can say that. So
I'd say so. Would you feel comfortable sharing some of the things that you might have changed? It was just like a procedure or an order of things. Is something like that you feel comfortable with, or it's something that's still in the process of figuring out as a team?
You know, nothing really stands out. So when I said that, I mean, I know that, like, I'm talking maybe like small, minor things as far as maybe some equipment, you know, some things that we could just have done better. But
on that note, I guess that's a good takeaway too, in that each time there's like a real world event that you guys go out and do something like this, your ability to meet the next mission is even stepped up more because you realize like what would have been fantastic to have on that is this piece of equipment, or if we
Yep.
did this procedure instead of that,
Absolutely.
it would have come out a little bit better than it did. So, what was the feeling like as you were on that, I guess, 2.5 hour ride on the Portuguese search and rescue helicopter? By the way, if you don't mind, like you could
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what your experience was of them. I mean, it was great to see that you guys knew once they were lowering their rescue swimmer that you were in the hands of some professionals and that they knew what they were doing, and you kind of, the level of trust and confidence went up tenfold.
Yeah.
But what was that experience like working with them? And then what was it like once you were in the cabin of the helicopter for that 2.5 hour ride? Maybe the thoughts and feelings you had and what the processes were taking place then.
So they were great. I tried to just communicate with the pilots. Hey, how long? While my medics were talking to the doctor was overjoyed. The doctor was a new flight doc, and this was basically one of his first missions. And he said to me after, he's like, "This is probably the mission of my life." He's like, "This is unbelievable, like the condition of these patients." And he wouldn't have changed the medical treatment at all. As a matter of fact, we weren't sure if he was gonna strip him down to see anything, but he did a quick look and he looked at some of the injuries. He looked at the trach and the crike and the vent settings and the medications that were pushed, but he thought that everything was perfect. So we basically just continued what we were doing on the ship and monitoring. The doc did put a couple of inputs. He had some medications that our PJs don't carry, and help for the patient's condition. And then I just talked to the pilots about, hey, confirming who was meeting us, when we get back to the island. There was some doubt that there were going to be paramedics or doctors on the fixed wing to take them out. So that means that we were supposed to be get on that plane, transfer them again, and go to Portugal. And we didn't really know definitively until we landed, because they didn't have line of sight comms back home, so they couldn't really confirm that for us. So even till we touched down, we thought there's a possibility of us going to Portugal. So we were just kind of working through that.
Yeah, just thinking that like it may not end when you get back on
Yeah.
land in the Azores, it might be. And is that the same as like a transload we would do for our team? Like
Yep.
the idea of like their aircraft is on the ground ready to go,
Yep.
helicopter landed, put them in, and then right off to the hospital. in
Absolutely, it's
Portugal.
exactly what happened. They were right there on the deck. They had to move the plane over, but the ambulance came out to help us transfer them over, and there was a full surgical team, multiple doctors. So,
How did that feel to be able to, I guess, get that validation from a flight doc as a medical professional yourself, like when you're there and kind of thinking of all the things you and your team did to make those critical decisions to keep these guys as pain-free as possible and care for them in the best way possible, and then to get on that aircraft and have the doctor pretty much say, there's not a thing more I would do or do differently.
yeah, it was great. And what the doctor did do was, one of our medics was, pretty new, and he could tell, he looks young, and I think Sergeant Smith told him, hey, this is one of my new guys. And he would just talk to him and kind of mentored him, like, hey, so what'd you do? And it was great to see them just kind of, the teaching moment, it was great. So it was nice.
So really nice. So in a way, like he sat there with Senior Airman Hartman and just kind of
Yes.
walked through process and said,
Yep.
what did you do, why, and
Yep.
validation for
Yeah,
him
we just
too.
say, hey, let's take a look at this IV. Oh, this was good. It was secured nice, and just ask them some nice little questions, and what are you gonna do next? So it was nice to see them working together like that.
Fantastic.
So
Do you remember when you first realized that, like, okay, there is a plane waiting, there are other medical professionals, like, our part is done? What that feeling was like, and like what was some of the first things like you were thinking? Like, I've asked some of the other guys, was it like kind of like couldn't wait to get something to eat, couldn't wait to go to sleep, take a shower? Like what was that like? Make a phone call home? I don't know. Walk us through what that experience was like.
So as I said before, the base commander congratulated us. I shook his hand. It was that was nice. It was my first moment. I said, kind of like, wow, okay, congratulations. I guess we did this, right? But then my mind immediately switched to work mode, because we had equipment that we didn't want to give to the bird going to Lisbon. They were very expensive monitors. So we kind of worked through that. How are we going to get those back? And so I was working on that, and then the mission commander from the Azores was like, "Hey, we have your rep from the Air Force is here. They're going to take you to lodging and all this kind of stuff. Oh, and by the way, PA guy happens to be here from Germany, and he wants to have an interview with you guys." So, and then I'm just trying to get out of my dry suit, and it was like, so there's a lot of things going on. So it wasn't until I think it was a beer in hand about 4 or 5 hours later when I kind of, sat back and relaxed.
That's a neat piece that I didn't even know of, yeah. And that kind of also makes me think and wonder, like, I never considered the idea that these are some high dollar items, and as much as, of course, we're all about saving lives and everything, it's like, yeah, to have an after plan of saying, like, hey, how do we get back those ventilators and everything? Obviously, it's not like you just go, well, hey, we're going to unplug all our stuff, now you guys use yours. It's kind of, I guess, a plan needs to be put in place to, like, how do you get that equipment back to make sure it's ready to go for the next mission?
Yeah, exactly. And just moving the patients, too, you're moving them, you're trying to work with people that, the English isn't perfect, but, we worked through it enough. But, they bring the stretchers on the bird. Which patient do we take first? Do you want it head? Which way do you want the head position? You're going into the ambulance, and then we're going to move over, and then taking them off the ambulance into the other bird. So there's a lot of, like, little coordination like that, it was just that I couldn't just go, oh, okay, it's over, it's good. But
Is there
so
a
slow.
moment for you guys that, I'm sure, just watch that mic too, is there a moment where it's like that the patient kind of moves over and becomes a person? I know they're always a person, but I think as some of the guys talk, like, it's very much a sterile environment mentally to be able to treat and care and render care to that patient. And then it wasn't until, like, you're getting ready to get on the aircraft that some of the crew members packed personal bags, and you kind of said, open up to make sure the right thing's going to the right guy, that you first had a chance to, like, set eyes on this person as what they looked like before the accident.
Yeah.
And realize, wow, this is who we were caring for, their name and whatever. What's the impact of something like that as you're going through that real life?
Yeah, it was, I tell the story, it was, seeing his face. I saw his ID card, and I saw a piece of paper with his wife's name and phone number on it. So that for me was the time. I mean, the whole time I was with one of the patients, and I would talk to him. Hey, you're in good hands. We're taking care of you. And when he was able to, he would respond, with like some kind of like he understood me. But yeah, in the helicopter, I went through his personal bag and I found his ID, and I couldn't believe the picture I was seeing. It was the same person, but yeah.
That's got to be tough, I'm sure. That's like a tough moment.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, I guess, I'm sure even though the mission ends, like, the moment doesn't end for you. So we live in a pretty extraordinary world in that we were able to have contact with I think, was it 751st, the squadron, the Portuguese search and rescue squadron?
Yeah.
I think so. But just contact with those guys and seeing their footage and video that they had, and then the nurse, Sophia, one of the nurses, reached out to us through our Facebook page, and we were able to have this dialogue back and forth with her and learn about, how these guys are doing in the burn unit in Portugal.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that the world we live in today provides us with that 10 years ago even, that probably was not the case.
Nah.
The military was a lot more closed off world. There wasn't that kind of open line of communication on these types of things. Has that been gratifying for you guys as a team, like, to get some of that feedback from the burn unit? And does the thought process kind of, like, continue for you, and thinking, like, hey, I wonder how those guys are doing, or, like, what's that like for you?
Yeah, there's probably not a day that I don't think about them. And I just, I keep praying that they do make a full recovery. So I know that some of the feedback we got was that the procedures that we have done have saved, limbs and definitely saved their lives. But we still don't know, if one day, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, we can go visit them, they can visit us, and and discuss, and see that they're happy and see how their lives are progressing, So that's what I'm hoping for. I mean, that would be my ultimate dream, just to see them one day. And so.
That's a pretty amazing piece. Just that's a very different level of investment, I think, than other people have in whatever their day-to-day jobs are. And I think that each one of the folks that were involved, from obviously ourselves as Americans and our team, and from the guys in the plane, the guys in the water, and everybody included, to the rescue coordination centers, to the folks from Peconic Bay Medical Center that provided last-minute supplies to make it to the aircraft just in time for launch, to the professionals on the Portuguese side that were just amazing and did a great job, and were and the hospital, all those gears turning to making sure that these two guys are still here.
Yep.
And, didn't suffer the same fate as their friends, unfortunately. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
So as a last question, what for you, Major, are your, takeaways from this as you move forward in your career?
Well, as I said earlier, it's probably a mission of a lifetime. But now that it's opened the door, I would love to do it again. I know I might have to wait my turn, because I know everyone down at the squadron is chomping at the bit for the next one, and just gonna keep preparing, probably prepare a little extra, because now it's reality that these missions will be granted to us. Yeah, that's it.
Great validation of all that you guys do, all the work you put in to have it culminate in that real world rescue that was a success across the board, as best as it could be in the conditions.
Yep.
Well, hey, great stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And I'll go ahead and stop down.
All right.
Anything else you'd like to offer? Something we might have forgotten? I forget. I always like to say that.
No, I think we touched on everything.
One last thing, I think of, because you've talked about it, and just because I have a relationship with you, I think that at some level, I'd imagine that going through this event, seeing these two gentlemen, feeling that personal connection, talking with them, understanding, that there's a wife or a loved one involved, as you'd imagine there might be.
Yeah.
But when it becomes more real, I think, did it change, like when you got to see your wife and son again? Did it feel like you hugged them a little longer or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My wife, I said to her around 11:30, I'm like, hey, this mission's a go. And I didn't talk to her again until basically I think it was Saturday morning. I had sent one email, and basically the team had, I had made one phone call actually when I was about to board the plane on Friday night. But I knew the team had taken care of and called her and tried to, tell her I was out of danger at least after the jump was over and things like that. So I knew she was taken care of in that respect. But yeah, definitely. And I think she appreciates me a little more now too. So
that's an interesting piece too. So I guess in some way, the loved ones and family members, especially on a mission like this, that's not a combat environment, not sensitive, not classified, that's a rescue, civilian rescue situation, that there is more of the ability to kind of update loved ones as to the status of, their family member, that, hey, the jump went okay, they're there, they're with the patient now.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it was good. I mean, I think once we were on the ship, everyone could take a deep breath and be like, okay, I think these guys are going to be all right. So they, would tell the family just to, let them have their mind at ease a little bit. So.
One last thing, what was it like when everybody got reunited again, and where was that, and how did that go, as far as because the team was split up, three of you guys went in the helicopter, the 130 guys landed and then came back, is that right? So
yes.
What was it like when everybody was finally all together? Because obviously there's one big group picture. And
Yep. So the plan was to, let the guys, they're supposed to be there a lot earlier and get off the ship pretty quickly, but there was delays. And then, so the plan was to basically let them get some sleep, take a shower, and then maybe have some dinner. Well, they got delayed until like 2 in the morning. But from 2 to 4, there was some celebrating and some stories, and this is what happened. It was great, and it was great to, it wasn't just our team. It was the entire ops group. You had the C-130 pilots there, you had the maintainers, and everyone was just, giving their piece of the story and talking about it, and hey, you're great, I'm great, But it was a lot of fun, and the morale, I think, has just, you know, went up tenfold over at the ops group, and hopefully on base, because everyone on base deserves a little bit of joy in this too, because we're not going out, and if everyone on this base is not doing their job, you know, so they should have some gratification too.
Yeah, everybody has a stake in the
You know?
game, so
Everyone has a stake in the game. I like that. Yep, exactly.
great stuff.
And I try to tell everyone I talk to, hey, thank you, you know, thanks for getting me out there, because you know, you're part of the rescue. So.